With the Fate Collab's limited spotlight duration ending, I think it's time we address the big question of the collaboration. Did it hit or did it miss? Well, from my very personal side, I want to keep it very simple to start this video off. I enjoyed the event itself. I think the Divergent Universe branch off that they did to incorporate Fate combat elements was fun. I like the way they maintained the feel of a Divergent Universe type of endgame and how it made the collab characters, Saber and Archer, that much more fun to play. So with that being said, I mostly played with Saber because farming the Quantum set sucks and I legit haven't gotten anything for Archer even now, but nevertheless, still a fun Divergent Universe branch. The collab characters themselves probably exceeds what you expect from Hoyo to begin with. They definitely learned from Alloy. Not that there was anything else that they should take from that other than don't make collab units beyond useless, and gave Saber and Archer very meta-usable kits, but above all, the design and skill animations. Bringing in the original concept artists to design them and then having them utter their full Noble Phantasm lines for their ults. I got friends who wanted to stand at attention when Archer started doing his. The fact that they give him out for free is also nice. Making the collab last far longer than what people expected is also a very good move on their part, as it at least gives people the opportunity to not be left out. And over the span that they plan to keep the collab here, it also gives people a chance to get Archer's LC with the 200 pulls if they wanted to. Honestly, the more I went through the collab, and I kinda came in late after just pulling for the characters because I still had to catch up with Amphorius, I'm honestly finding more and more things to like about the collab. But it's just unfortunate from my end because even though I know that I am finding more fun as I go through the whole event, there is that one lingering thought at the back of my mind that will never allow me to fully say, okay, that was a good collab. And that is the fact that the collab had been missing Shiro, and most importantly for me, the absolute queen of tsunderes herself, Rin Tosaka. Look, I don't think anyone can blame me for this. When I saw the announcement for the Fate collab that 1 year ago, the very thing that I immediately tunnel visioned into was the very fact that it was a Fate Unlimited Bladeworks collab. So naturally, it being my absolute favorite route because having the queen, Rin Tosaka, in any franchise is an absolute win in my book, I immediately thought to myself, holy shit, Rin with HSR graphics and animation? Ladies and gents, sign me and my bank account up. And if they wanted to get Kana Ueda, Rin's original JP voice, into the fray, then Hoyo probably wouldn't fret because she voiced Yoimiya in Genshin. And to top it all off, Shiro's VA is also Kanisha's VA, so they already have access to them in the first place. So when I then get a message from my friend who's usually quite on point about who's not in a future version of Star Rail, and he said to me that Rin is not going to be part of the Fate collab, my enthusiasm for the collab just kinda dropped because that right there is half the reason why I wanted to see this collab come into fruition in the first place. And it only fell a bit further when the collab characters were then announced, confirming that Rin was indeed not a playable character. And to me, it was so unfortunate because even before Braxavon had said in his stream or channel, I had already thought of the notion that the way they can make the collab characters is by giving them the Clara treatment. Have Rin and Shiro be sort of the main avatars of the characters, I guess, and then have Archer and Saber respectively be the one to chime in and handle the heavy business as they do like in the anime. And with how Archer's kit in particular ended up being, we can make it like a Fei Xiao thing where Archer does the basic skills itself, while Rin is the one who executes the follow-up attack or something. I feel like it was a nice concept to have and kind of a straightforward one to begin with. So while yes, I appreciate and find it very cool that we ended up with the characters and kits that we have, there's just nothing for me to fill that tsundere void that could have been Rin. And the fact that her pendant of all things was the only thing about her that physically made it to the game was kind of like a further kick in the balls for me. That just now was mostly what really bummed me out about it. But of course, there's some community notes that I want to talk about, and most of them has somewhat to do with lack of proper execution in some parts of the event. The general consensus that I've seen from the community is that for HSR players, the collab was fine, but for Fate players, it was kind of a disappointment. Mostly because there are arguments to be made that the Fate players were expecting a bit more Fate in the collab, while the Star Rail players knew it was probably just going to be HSR with a dash of Fate. And I can definitely see the point on both sides. After all, it is Fate coming into HSR instead of the other way around, which I think is already the best way to do it because comparatively, if you were to try and drag HSR players to more Fate stuff, then they're just gonna have a brain hemorrhage because the Fate universe is dicey to say the very least. Even that's probably a massive understatement. How do I explain to the general public that Leonardo da Vinci is a woman and at some point also a lolly in the Fate universe? Yeah, so it's kinda like if I were to drag a Stranger Things fan to go and watch Doctor Who. You'd hardly find a scenario where that's probably gonna end well. But it's also not wrong for the Fate people to expect a bit more in the collab because 1. The collab itself was announced quite a while ago, when other gachas comparatively announced their collabs at most only months before launching it in their game. And 2. We know that Hoyo has been working with Ufotable before the collab announcement, obviously because they've announced their collaboration working for the Genshin anime even longer beforehand. So even I kinda expected that they can pull up something more for the scale of a collab. Of course, all this lacklusterness eventually made its way to the grievances regarding the story itself. Honestly, I've only played half of it so far, but from a story perspective, I think the story is actually pretty fine. Well, of course, as some of the Fate players say, it was kinda irredeemable, which I can also see why they would think that way. I don't want to talk about it too much just to avoid spoilers, but from the Star Rail side, it was fine, but Scott and Grady were definitely two characters that I really could have done without a lot of in this story. Even at the point where I am, they just have way too much screen time for a collab story. And of course, as everyone playing the collab would know, there are also complaints about Saber and Archer not having ENVAs, which was valid, cause yeah, it was very weird to just have them voiceless if you were to play EN dub. But at the same time, I think someone said that their OGVAs are union people, and we know that that's a box that Hoyo probably wouldn't touch even with a 10-foot pole at the moment. And to begin with, the OG EN dub for Unlimited Blade Works was meh to say the least. Can't really say we're missing out on much. That being said, they should have definitely thought of just mixing the dubs like they do now. Would have saved them a lot more trouble. And the whole using pre-existing places and resources to have it become Britain or whatever is in fact, in all fairness to the dev team, something that most if not all gacha collabs from anywhere in the industry would do. Which is kinda the microcosm of the justification for why the collab is the way it is. And don't get me wrong, I've played a lot of collabs from a lot of different gachas. The scale in which Star Rail had just done Fate is actually much bigger than what you would normally see from any gacha collabs out there. For instance, PGR collabed with Nier Automata and they only added Nier characters to the game, and same thing with other games like Countersight and Battle Cats. Especially Battle Cats. They have so many collabs, but all they do is put characters from those other series into the game as playable, well, supposedly cats, but most of them just kept their base design from their respective IPs. So there is an element of just having such a low bar of standard for gacha collabs out there, but for me, that just doesn't really cut it as the only reason, cause why not try to make this collab as big as possible? This is the same company that made Simulanka as a temporary regent for an event, not even a collab event. I mean, look at Simulanka. It was genuinely beautiful, expansive, and it was for an open world game. And I'm supposed to believe that they couldn't have whipped something up for Star Rail? At least, one exclusive submap area? They were gonna have this stay around for quite a while longer than most gacha collabs would anyway, so wouldn't that make sparing a temporary map area be a bit more worth it? That's really my thing with this collab. They could have used it to really up the ante in terms of what we can expect from gacha collabs going forward. That being said, there is one scenario, one very hopium scenario that can completely give it reason for me to actually view this collab as a positive success. Hear me and my copium train out here. So, the story for the collab itself is categorized as a Trailblaze Continuance questline. This kind of actually means that the story portion itself has a high chance of being a permanent part of Star Rail's kind of universal storyline. This is not something that you usually see from gacha collabs. Usually, if the collabs do have story portions, they would return to the game in accordance to when the collab itself is rerunning, if it ever does. The fact that Star Rail's Fate story portion is most likely staying may be a clue to the notion that this is a collab that not only would be rerunning, but could also have a sequel. And if you think about it, the pieces are kind of already set for them. pushing every bit of fate narrative in this portion of the collab would have definitely confused a lot of the only Star Rail playing players. But now, we are familiar with the Holy Grail, we are familiar with the servants, who they are and how they ended up being summoned, and the roles in which they play alongside the Masters of the War. And that's kinda all they need to set it up. This being Star Rail, a game set in space with wonky timelines where we can find ourselves in very random corners of the universe and time if the Aeons wills it, it wouldn't be far-fetched to think that we can end up in some form of a setting that could simulate the Earth where another Holy Grail war takes place, with characters like Shiro and Rin being part of the roster. That's sort of both the strength and weakness of Star Rail setting. It's space and time, so the feasibility of any random place in the universe being visited is never, well, never. But at the same time, that's just it. It's random. We will always need some really good justification to explain why being there was worth doing for the Astral Express to begin with, because if a good cause ain't there, then it can really make for a flaky foundation for the entire storyline. But with the Holy Grail War now being a thing in the Express's databank, it's rather fitting that we might find ourselves amidst another war, and changing the circumstances of how we're involved shouldn't really be that difficult either. We're already introduced to Lancer, and we know he has a model set in the game. We can make it so that this time around, we pair up with him instead. And then Rin and Shiro can finally have their Clara-based characters become the other playable collab characters. Who cares if it ends up making 2 versions of Saber and Archer? We're about to have 3 Dan Hungs and technically I guess 3 Marshes. I certainly wouldn't mind 2 of those collab characters. And if we stay with the nature of Fate Unlimited Blade Works, then designing models for characters like Shinji, Sakura, Kirei, and even for Shiro and Rin shouldn't be that big of a challenge for Hoyo's resources. They either dress in their professions or casual clothes, though of course if they ever want to push it, they could stand to give Rin and Shiro their coat-wearing appearances. Of course, if they get to the point where they'd have to design other Unlimited Blade Works servants like Caster and Assassin, sure, that will get spicy, but come on. This kind of storyline is sure to make for one hell of a collab. They just need to figure out which servant to give Kirei this time around. Maybe just have Mr. Giga Gilga be his servant? Wouldn't that be a treat? Fate people, has that ever happened before? I feel like it would end up being a game of who would murder the other first. But yeah, for me, that's the kind of copium it would take for me to be able to fully be satisfied with this collab. It's Unlimited Blade Works. What is Unlimited Blade Works without Rin and Shiro absolutely bumbling around one another? Until they make their appearances, I can never wholeheartedly say that I think the collab was bang on. As it stands, it's missing quite a big void for me, and it just feels like it's incomplete. It needs my queen. And her king, I guess, I can include you too, Shiro. It's fine. But really, come on, Star Rail players, would you really actually pass up the chance on having this kind of woman in your game? I think not. That's about it from my side. Honestly, judging from a perspective that only purely sees how this has been for a gacha collab, I guess due to the kind of very low bar that the industry itself has set, but it's actually a decent collab overall, I guess. But it's Hoyo, it's UFO Table, it's the Fate series, and it's pretty much a one-in-a-decade type of opportunity. So if there are people who expected more, yeah, I'm with them. I genuinely wouldn't have minded if they actually needed more time and pushed it back just a little bit more to account for more content like what I kind of wanted, but hey, we got what we got, so what can we really do? At least Saber and Archer are very usable, so there are a lot of content scenarios where we do see them used quite often. Thanks for watching as usual, hope you guys have a blessed day. Until the next video, the name's Leafy, and I'll see y'all next time. Sayonara.